Ready to go? Well, today we're going to talk a little bit about some of the things that happened this week. Let me just give you a little bit of an update. I wish you could get my email some of the time. I get emails every day almost from people who are very appreciative of what we do here at Fellowship Bible Chapel, both in the first and second services, and the fact that we're willing to talk about, in terms of Bible prophecy, what is going on in the world. I got a call from a lady in the East Coast this week, and she said, "You're my church. You've helped me grow as a Christian because I cannot find any Christian churches around where I live." And I get those type of emails all the time. Now, the emails I don't want you to get are the ones from the Gestapo and some of the other groups that don't seem to appreciate too much what we're doing here, and you don't need that, and they can get quite insulting and quite direct. But it's really been a blessing. I appreciate your support for our live stream and video ministry. Around the 1st of May, we passed 500,000 views on our YouTube channel, and this week we hit, either today or tomorrow, we'll hit 750,000 views. So we've gotten 250,000 views in just about 2.5 months, which is a testament to the reach of the internet. And it's a real God thing because we don't spend money promoting it or anything. Some days we're getting, averaging, like over the course of a week, 5,000 views a day, which is really pretty good. It's pretty amazing in the reach. So I continue to pray for that. And again, we really, really appreciate your support. Well, this week, I'm going to spend some time talking about the Iranian Nuke Deal, because it has prophetic implications, it has practical implications for our world. It is, again, part of what I see as this convergence of events, these things that are all the signs of Bible prophecy that seem to be coming together at the same time. Not seem to be, they are coming together at the same time. I was listening to, by the way, if you want to hear a good show this week, Jan Markell had a very good show yesterday with Bill Koenig and Robert Jeffers on Understanding the Times. You can find that at allatreeviews.org. And one of the things she talked about was convergence. And it seems to be on the lips of almost everybody who speaks on Bible prophecy, that all these things are just kind of coming together. But I want to say this, and I heard a pastor in Hawaii who also does a prophecy update each week. There's a couple others that do it. And he mentioned this first because I was having some conversations with people this week. And, you know, it's a mixed bag. It's sort of like Steve said in the first hour, that the Temple Institute is announcing that they're going to build a temple, and they're announcing some of the things that are really in the final stages of getting ready to build a temple. It'll be a huge geopolitical issue when they go ahead to do it. But I have, and while I'm happy that it's happening, I have mixed emotions about it, because I know that that temple will be used by the Antichrist, by the man of sin, by the son of perdition, who will unleash terrible suffering across the world. And he will initially come on the scene as a man of peace. He will be spouting great things. He will have no compunction about lying. I think Chuck Missler referred to him a number of times as Mr. Big Mouth. And that is a perfect characteristic if you look at the descriptions in Daniel about the Antichrist, the beast, the son of perdition. That's what he is. He's the consummate liar, politician and liar, but he will have a religious component to him. And so as we study these things, it is easy to kind of slip into a state of almost despair or depression. And that's what Solomon wrote about in the book of Ecclesiastes. For in much wisdom is much grief, and he that increaseth knowledge increases sorrow. And so while I have this hope and the blessing that I know is coming with the return of Jesus to the earth to set up his kingdom, and what that means for believers and the believing remnant of Israel, I also know that there's a lot of negative things that go along with it. So you try to balance the two things, and sometimes it's a little difficult, and sometimes it is easy to get kind of caught up in a state of despair, like the world is falling apart. But look, at least you know the world is falling apart. You're not like people who are out there blindly going along, like so many in really churches that just act like nothing's happening. Everything is happy clappy. Don't worry about anything. Everything will be okay. So that's why we talk about the things that are going in the world today, so you can put them in perspective. It can help you develop your worldview and keep things in the proper perspective. That with the despair goes great hope. There's great promise about the things that are coming. Well, one of the things we saw this week is that the Greeks have now approved new austerity measures, and you can see they're really happy about that. The public is happy what the government has done. I'm only going to mention this just because it's something that it's close to where my in-laws have lived. And the church in Devore, where Jacob speaks, a lot of times Jacob Prash and I've spoken, is located right here. And this is the junction of the 215 and 15 freeways. 15 goes down to, and then the 15 goes all the way up to Las Vegas. It goes all the way down to San Diego that way. And there's a pass through there. And one time, Pam and I think we were driving up to Las Vegas to have dinner with somebody, and there was a fire on the pass. And whenever there's fire in these pass areas around Los Angeles, the traffic gets all jammed up because people slow down. Well, what happened was they slowed down because there was fire on the freeway, and because of the high winds there in the pass, the fire actually jumped the freeway and caught several dozen vehicles on fire. Here's a picture of one of them on fire, and you can see the people fleeing their vehicles, and then the aftermath was quite interesting. So this is because of the severe drought conditions in California, and it's just one of the things, like we live with a little bit of extra rain right here and the flash floods and things that go along with it. They live with the fires. So it would seem like it'd be nice if we could get the people with the rain and the people with the fires to kind of share weather and resources, but it doesn't quite work out this way. I'm going to make a couple comments about a couple things that I saw this week. I actually happened to turn on a video of Bruce Jenner getting a Courage Award at ESPN, and I actually watched like 4 seconds of it, and I was struck at, look, pray for him because he's him, pray for him. He's still a male, and he has a mental illness. I mean, I think even the doctors would say that. And it may be very terrible. He needs help. There's some in his past he claimed to be a believer. There's been very little evidence of that, I think, in years since. But at one point he did, testify that he was a Christian. On Dr. Drew the other night, on one of the CNN stations, they had a discussion. They had a transgender individual, and you'll see this person right here, the blonde, and next to him is Ben Shapiro. And Ben Shapiro is a Jewish lawyer type, and he has a tendency to be very direct, and he kept referring to her, to this transgender person, as him. And so I just want you to watch a little bit of the exchange that took place there.
You're very familiar with that, Zoe.
Very familiar.
It's not about the chromosomes within our
both know
nuclei. Yeah, go ahead.
Chromosomes don't necessarily mean you're male or female.
Gender.
With gender
identity. Go ahead. No, so
especially, but even so, you have a thing like Klinefelter's syndrome. So you don't know what you're talking about. You're not educated on genetics.
Would you like to discuss the genetics? Or
well, no,
what
no.
are your genetics?
So I'd stay away from the genetics and back to the brain scans.
You cut that out now, or you'll go home in an ambulance.
Yeah, that seems mildly inappropriate for a political discussion.
No, I know. Well, but wait, to be fair, but to be fair, you're actually being
hey guys,
rude.
You're
and that's not fair.
I'm sorry, it's not rude to say that someone who's biologically a male is a male.
You just
someone who's biologically male is a male.
But Mr. Shapiro, you knew very well that saying that to Zoe would be would be egregiously insulting.
It's not a matter of insulting or inflammatory.
It
It's a
is.
fact.
No, well, sir, you're right. Hey, on paper, what is a fact is a fact, and I can't deny that. But you knew that going in that to saying that to Zoe would be aggressively insulting.
It's a matter of aggressively insulting.
It is.
The entire discussion is whether we are embracing mental illness and delusion as a society. That's the entire discussion.
No. But that's you're avoiding the fact. You're avoiding the fact. If you want to talk facts, you're avoiding the fact. You're not a dumb man. You knew that saying that to Zoe would be incredibly hurtful.
Okay, look, these are all college-educated people now, and this is the level of discussion that's going to happen in our society. Do you agree with me that it is insane? It's madness on a, and I'm telling you folks, I say this over and over again, in the end times, the largest characteristic of the end times is deception. And as you pull apart the various scriptures, this deception operates on a massive scale. It is geopolitical because a man who is spouting lies and eventually possessed by Satan himself will become a great world leader. It will be on a cultural scale, like you see here. It will be on a religious scale. And things will be said and done, and to the true believer, you're going to say, wait a minute, what is going on? And what is going on is the spirit of deception is being unleashed across the world in society and government and culture by God as a judgment on people who are rejecting him and shaking their fist in his face. And if you don't think that's happening in America, look at discussions like this, which are happening all the time. Take a stand for traditional marriage. Take a stand that male is male and female is female, and see what happens to you. You will be ridiculed. You'll be threatened by the great tolerant left that you'll go home in an ambulance if you keep that up. You need to get prepared mentally that this is the lot of life, because it is the days of Lot. This is the way it's going to be. Stand bold. God will protect you, but understand your message, your view will not be popular. And all the stuff I hear Christians say, oh, we just need to show love. We just need to be tolerant. Baloney. We need to stand for the truth. That is love. The Center for Medical Progress this week released a video. I'll play just a little bit of it of Dr. Deborah Nucatello, who is the Senior Director of Medical Services for Planned Parenthood Federation of America.
A lot of people want attack parts these days because they're looking for specific.
Now what she's talking about is
I didn't even know.
People want body parts from the abortions.
Yesterday was the first time she said people wanted.
Look at her, she's eating her salad, drinking her wine, casually talking about body parts.
Livers. People want lower extremities too, which that's
now watch what she says.
I don't know what they're doing with it. I guess they want muscle.
She's going to talk about how we have to be careful how we do the abortion so we can preserve these body parts. And they talked about the price range.
You know, I'm going to throw a number out. I would say it's probably anywhere from $30 to $100, depending on the facility and what's involved.
The $30 to $100 price, that's per specimen that we're talking about, right? Yeah.
Then a rate-limiting step of the procedure is calvarium. Calvarium, the head is basically the biggest part. Most of the other stuff can come out intact.
Right.
It's very rare to have a patient that doesn't have enough dilation to evacuate all the other
to bring the body cavity out intact and all that.
So then you just kind of
excuse me while I have another bite of my salad as I talk about crushing a human being to death.
Below the thorax, so that we've been very good at getting parts on liver because we know that. So I'm not going to crush that part. I'm going to basically crush below. I'm going to crush above, and I'm going to see if I can get it out intact. And with the calvarium, in general, some people will actually try to change the presentation so that it's not a vertex. Because when it's a vertex presentation, you never have enough dilation at the beginning of the case unless you have a real huge amount of dilation to deliver an intact calvarium. So if you do it starting from the breech presentation, there's dilation that happens as the case goes on, and often at the last, you can evacuate an attack So I mean, there are certainly steps that can be taken.
So they can
try
convert to
ensure-
breach, for example, at the start of the...
Exactly. They,
Excellent.
under ultrasound guidance, they can just change the presentation. One of the Northern California affiliates said, we're working with these people, we love it, we think every affiliate should work with them. And so we had a conversation, and we said, what do you think? We'll just go out and find all the people that are doing this and present everybody with a menu. And they, at the end of the day, they just decided right now it's too touchy an issue
So
for
what
us
she
to
says
be
is
an
that
official middleman. But that when you
they were
say
thinking
right
about
now-
coming up with a menu of body parts.
Right now, the way
provide
Supreme
to
Court
people.
looks, I don't think it looks very good.
And can you
You
take
talk
the
to
sound down?
litigation and law folks, anything
And
that's going to go
so
to
they
the
put
Supreme
this,
Court right now.
they're putting the body
they're all
part together. And she's like,
But I will tell
you know,
you
we
that
decided we couldn't
behind
do that
closed
because it
doors,
was kind of a
these
touchy
conversations are
subject.
happening with the affiliates.
I'm sorry? You can't hear me? Okay, so she's talking about putting a menu together so they could have a body part menu of things that you could get from Planned Parenthood.
Thank you so much for helping Nicola. She's been
Here is a little later conversation with Cecile Richards, who's the president and CEO of Planned Parenthood, and they have a video of her saying, we met with this doctor, your director of medical services. She was very helpful. And Cecile says, oh, she's wonderful, isn't she? She's just fantastic. Well, now they released the video. Now Planned Parenthood has a problem. Now listen, so this is what Cecile Richards said about to sort of cover up, or to do damage control.
Recently, an organization that opposes safe and legal abortion used secretly recorded, heavily edited videos to make outrageous claims about programs that help women donate fetal tissue for medical research. I want to be really clear. The allegation that Planned Parenthood profits in any way from tissue donation is not true. Our donation programs, like any other high-quality healthcare providers, follows all laws and ethical guidelines. Over our 100-year history, we've continually engaged leading medical experts to shape our practices, policies, and high standards, and we always will. Our top priority is the compassionate care that we provide. In the video, one of our staff members speaks in a way that does not reflect that compassion. This is unacceptable, and I personally apologize for the staff member's tone and statements. As always, if there's any aspect of our work that can be strengthened, we want to know about it and we take swift action to address it. Planned Parenthood stands behind our work to help women and families donate tissue for medical research when they wish to. It is always their decision. Your commitment to life-saving research, developing treatments for diseases like Parkinson's and Alzheimer's, is important and compassionate, and it should be respected, not attacked. We know the real agenda of organizations behind videos like this, and they have never been concerned with protecting the health and safety of women. Their mission is to ban abortion completely and to cut women off from care at Planned Parenthood and other health centers.
Okay, I can't listen to too much more of that. The doctor and this lady have a moral compass that is completely broken, if it exists at all. You cannot listen to this and understand that these people are immoral, and the procedures that they engage in are so vile that she's still in the face of it. Her doctor is talking about body parts, and she's talking about fetal tissue. Now, whoever's running Center for Medical Progress, praise the Lord for them. And they've been very clever, because what they did was they released the video of the top dog on medical services, and they got her to respond that this lady does not reflect Planned Parenthood. What Hugh Hewitt reported on a show the other night was that Center for Medical Progress has up to a dozen more videos of high-level Planned Parenthood people that they will be releasing over the next few weeks. And then she's going to, you understand how clever that is? I pray that this will destroy Planned Parenthood. Okay? You can do cancer screenings in some place. You don't need to kill babies to do that stuff. And it is just, it's stunning to me that we allow this in our culture. On the internet, there was a new video or a new article on Real Clear Politics by, I think her name is Karen Wilhelm. And she talks about, how the doctor's yucking it up and it's just a business. And she's there, she's just munching on her salad and drinking her wine while she's talking about this extremely vile things. So here's what she says in the article. By Wednesday, the press was all over the story, albeit with one curious leading angle. Sure, they were saying Planned Parenthood neck deep in a national market for the body parts of unborn babies, but it's all probably legal. Legal, you see. What other gauge of morality could you possibly need? Now, that's not an actual quote, but it's pretty much the gist. Much of the press echoed Planned Parenthood's own damage control press release, which touted its tissue donation programs that help support life-saving scientific research, are never used to make a profit and are sometimes reimbursed to cover costs. Lost in the screaming are a few facts, said Kilgore Scout at Washington Monthly, such as a lack of any evidence that the abortions in question are actually illegal. The practice of fetal tissue transplantation, Newsweek reminded us, is entirely legal. Cosmo called the video a yawn, with evidence of anything illegal sorely lacking. The New York Times and the Associated Press seem to agree. As long as there is consent from the patient, that means the mother, not the dismembered many human, then there's no profit involved. There is nothing, at least we are told, to see here. What can we make of a culture, she concludes, growing in prominence in America that seems to draw its moral guidelines from what is legally permitted or endorsed by the state? In this view, the law does not follow from a higher moral authority. The law is the higher moral authority. Anyone with a rudimentary understanding of history should know that this is nonsense, that the law is capricious, and that the past 200 years alone are filled with legal atrocities. So why do certain people fall for this approach again and again? Perhaps a status god is easier to deal with than a real one. Perhaps on a deeper level, we think we can control the former or justify certain actions. If you watch the entire video of Dr. Deborah Nucatola's Nightmare Lunch Roundup, that's in all caps, you'll witness her amazing willingness to push, pull, and twist her organization's abortion practices. Abortions practiced past 20 weeks, partial birth abortions by another name, and more, to the outermost edge of the law. Laws are up to interpretation, she says breezily. Indeed, when they're the only thing holding you back from the abyss, you are in a dangerous place. Here's a little discussion about that, and this is Kristen Powers on Fox, a person of the left, who has some things to say about it.
I've never seen the response that we've had the last 3 days from Planned Parenthood. 3 statements in 3 days, including a video message from Cecile Richards. That's a different response than we've seen from them.
I think because this is particularly damning, and it's something that even pro-choice people look at and say, well, wait a minute. And the reason that it's so damning, setting aside whether or not they were selling any harvesting and selling anything, is that most people don't understand what happens in a late-term abortion, and we're told that this is nothing to see here, and suddenly they're talking about hearts and lungs, and people are saying, wait a minute, you're talking very about crushing a baby, and Planned Parenthood's coming out and saying, well, it wasn't compassionate enough the way we speak about this.
I apologize for the tone.
Most people don't think that there's any compassionate way to do this. There is no compassionate way to talk about crushing a baby in utero.
And she's right. Here's Rick Perry, who gave a good response to a question on MSNBC. This is interesting.
Governor, I'd like to ask you a couple questions about Planned Parenthood. There's a controversy swirling around them that you've weighed in on. First, I'd like you to say, does Planned Parenthood do anything, provide any services that you think are valuable? If so, what are they? And second, why are you so troubled by this video?
Well, Planned Parenthood does give some services that I would suggest to you are good for women's health, but being a purveyor...
Which ones, Governor? I'm sorry, just to be specific on that.
Oh, I think some of the cancer screenings, some of those types of screenings are obviously good for women's health. But when you look at the overall picture of what they do, they are they're in a business that the people of Texas have a real concern about. And Mark, let me ask you, you looked at that video and you're good with it?
I think the video raises a lot of questions, and you and others have raised them.
It does indeed, and I think you've just answered the question for us. Thank you.
Okay. That was actually pretty good for a politician. I have to give him credit. I don't have time to go into this morning because I have a lot I want to talk about, but the Iranian nuke deal, but this is a picture of Yellowstone. And we know that Yellowstone sits on one of the largest potential volcanoes in the world, if not the largest in the world. And if it ever blows, we're toast, literally, probably, or ash or whatever, covered with ash. If it went, this is the area of the United States that would pretty much, the light area would be what was devastated. The New Yorker has an interesting article this week about a potential earthquake in the Northwest that is probably even worse. I will play just a minute or two of this report on Shepard Smith about it. And I only say this is because these things are being discovered, and we know that earthquakes and increase in earthquakes is all part of the sign of the end time. So here's Fox News on the Northwest fault line up around Seattle.
Read a stunning article by Catherine Scholes in the New Yorker this week. And frankly, if I lived right now in the Pacific Northwest, I'd be considering moving. Seriously. The gist of it is this. The federal government estimates 13,000 Americans will die in a major earthquake and tsunami in the Pacific Northwest. It's not a question of whether, but when. This earthquake is coming, and it's overdue. Consider that the magnitude 9.0 earthquake in Japan just a few years ago, remember that? Killed more than 15,000 people in the north of Japan and injured thousands of others. Seismologists say that the quake that will strike on our Pacific Northwest coastline should be even stronger, at up to a 9.2. They call such a quake a margin rupture quake, and it's every bit as bad as it sounds. Here's the reason for it.
Well, I won't go into it, but the plates, or one plate's going under the other, and all this stuff. And I believe, if I understand the Richter scale correctly, from 9.0 to 9.1, that quake is 10 times more powerful. And then it's another 10 times more powerful to go to 9.2. I'm not sure about that, but it is it's a logarithmic scale. And so it's not just a little bit more. It goes up by powers of 10. So that, a 9.2, you saw what happened at Fukushima and all the tsunami and everything, and they're talking about a tsunami that would be 100 feet high that would result from this earthquake. So just understand that these things are predicted in Scripture, and the world is in a state where these things seem to be getting closer and closer. Well, this week we had a shooting down in Chattanooga, Tennessee. There were initially 4, now 5 Marines that were killed at a recruiting office by a person named Muhammad Abdul Aziz something. Now, I won't talk too much about it. I mean, I think it's pretty clear where this guy was coming from. At least anybody with, say, basic common sense would understand where this guy was coming from. What I found interesting was when they, on the front page of the New York Times yesterday, they had an article here about, okay, this guy went to Jordan, and maybe he got radicalized there, but we're not sure, we're not sure. But look at the picture that's on the front page. It's not a picture of the Marine's family suffering or anything. It's a picture of Indonesia celebrating the end of Ramadan. It's a quarter of the front page of the New York Times. I just find it very odd. I don't know. I'm not on the editorial board of the New York Times. I'm not likely to ever be on the editorial board of the New York Times. They're not likely to call me. Why are they doing this in the context of what just happened the day before? It's insanity. Here's the Empire State Building yesterday, celebrating the end of Ramadan. Ramirez gets it right. He says, for those who still believe what happens over there does not affect us over here, he's right. Now, the president spoke about this. First, though, I want to play a clip of him responding to the Charleston shooting about a month ago. Then I'm going to play his response. I want you to compare it very carefully to his response to the slaying of 5 Marines, some of them war heroes. Okay? Now listen, Charleston was evil. The guy was evil that did it, probably a racist, okay? I will accept that fact. I want you to watch the top government officer in our country and the way he responds to each of them, okay? Here's Charleston.
Good afternoon, everybody. This morning, I spoke with, and Vice President Biden spoke with Mayor Joe Riley and other leaders at Charleston to express our deep sorrow over the senseless murders that took place last night. And to say our thoughts and prayers are with them and their families and their community doesn't say enough to convey the heartache and the sadness and the anger that we feel. The Attorney General has announced plans for the FBI to open a hate crime investigation. We understand that the suspect is in custody, and I'll let the best of law enforcement do its work to make sure that justice is served. Until the investigation is complete, I'm necessarily constrained in terms of talking about the details of the case. But I don't need to be constrained about the emotions that tragedies like this raise. I've had to make statements like this too many times. Communities like this have had to endure tragedies like this too many times. We don't have all the facts, but we do know that, once again, innocent people were killed in part because someone who wanted to inflict harm had no trouble getting their hands on a gun. Now is the time for mourning and for healing. But let's be clear. At some point, we as a country will have to reckon with the fact that this type of mass violence does not happen in other advanced countries. It doesn't happen in other places with this kind of frequency. And it is in our power to do something about it.
Okay. He goes on, of course, to advocate gun control and some other things. But he talks about the fact, very clear terms, this man was evil that did this. Okay, now he's very formal. He's standing at the podium. He has the vice president at his side. So now here's his statement on the White House website on the shooting in Chattanooga.
I just received a briefing from FBI Director Comey as well as my White House team about the tragic shooting that took place in Chattanooga today. We don't know yet all the details. We know that what appears to be a lone gunman carried out these attacks. We've identified a name, and at this point, a full investigation is taking place. The FBI will be in the lead, working closely with local law enforcement. We've also been in contact with the Department of Defense to make sure that all our defense facilities are properly attentive and vigilant as we sort through exactly what happened. And as details of the investigation proceed, we'll make sure that the FBI as well as local law enforcement are providing the public with all the information that's involved. My main message right now is obviously the deepest sympathies of the American people to the 4 Marines that have been killed.
Okay, and he appropriately expresses sympathy for the families and the people that have been killed. But what does he not do in this case that he did in the other case? He talks about the crime. It's not a hate crime. Islamic terrorism never gets a mention from this guy. It doesn't exist in his mind. He lives in a world of his own making. I don't know. Make your own conclusions from that. Okay, let's go talk about the Iran deal, and we'll finish with this today. Now, I want to set this up in context. There's a lot of controversy. Have we reached peak oil? Or are we at peak oil? There's probably a finite oil supply in the world. There's some people who suggest that maybe it increases over time. from the heart of the earth. So, but the science on that is not well established. But what you need to know is, in this triangle in the Middle East, the Persian Gulf, lie, at least from known oil reserves on planet Earth, 60% of the oil reserves on planet Earth lie in that area between Saudi Arabia and Iran. What is also important, and Mark Langfin has done a great job on this, and you can find the maps at the Columbia University website that I'm using here. So in this triangle, Mark Langfin calls that the Shia triangle. The dark green represents Shia Islam. And so the oil fields actually lie within the control of the Shia sect by and large. Even in Saudi Arabia, the vast oil fields there are under in an area that is largely Shia Islam. Now, the government of Saudi Arabia is Sunni Islam, and they control the holy places of Mecca and Medina over on the western part of Saudi Arabia. But Iran is Shia. So I want to put in context that the majority of the world's oil supplies are within an area that the most powerful Shia government in the world effectively controls and wants to control completely. And so that's why this Iranian nuclear deal that pretty much steals the ability of the Iranians to get nuclear power is so significant this week. We saw the headlines in our press about the deal. Some saying it's great, some saying, oh, the people that are opposing it just don't understand. The people that oppose it don't have an alternative. Even in the Middle East and Lebanon and Saudi Arabia, in the Gulf states, they talked about it. The Jewish press, Haaretz, a left-wing newspaper in Israel, the Jerusalem Post, and then the Jewish Chronicle in England, also talked about the fact that is it a triumph or a disaster, is what the Jewish Chronicle asked. Netanyahu, of course, came out, we'll see a statement from him in just a moment, made the cover of Time magazine. Time magazine actually has a graphic in there calling the New Order, what the deal means for the Middle East and really the world. It's about a 159-page agreement. There's a picture of the PDF of it. The Economist also has something on the cover. Now, I'm not going to go into a lot of details about the agreement. I did read most of it. It's I'd love to have an English teacher grade it because it's a great example of unclear writing. But there is one section in there that I do want to reference, and it talks about this nuclear safety, safeguards, and security. Now, this is the obligation of the Western powers. They will cooperate. Cooperation through training and workshop to what? To help out people who might be subject to the Iranian nuclear program or the potential targets? No. Cooperation through training and workshops to strengthen Iran's ability to protect against and respond to nuclear security threats, including sabotage, as well as to enable effective and sustainable nuclear security and physical protection systems. So, if there happened to be a country, when this thing is implemented, if there happens to be a country that maybe doesn't want Iran, really doesn't want Iran to get a nuclear weapon, this essentially requires the Western powers to help Iran set up systems to protect Iran's nuclear program against a military attack or acts of sabotage. Now, who would want to do this? Here's President talking his initial statement about the deal.
Today, after 2 years of negotiations, the United States, together with our international partners, has achieved something that decades of animosity has not: a comprehensive long-term deal with Iran that will prevent it from obtaining a nuclear weapon. This deal demonstrates that American diplomacy can bring about real and meaningful change, change that makes our country and the world safer and more secure. This deal is also in line with a tradition of American leadership. It's now more than 50 years since President Kennedy stood before the American people and said, "Let us never negotiate out of fear, but let us never fear to negotiate." He was speaking then about the need for discussions between the United States and the Soviet Union, which led to efforts to restrict the spread of nuclear weapons. In those days, the risk was a catastrophic nuclear war between two superpowers. In our time, the risk is that nuclear weapons will spread to more and more countries, particularly in the Middle East, the most volatile region in our world. Today, because America negotiated from a position of strength and principle, we have stopped the spread of nuclear weapons in this region. Because of this deal, the international community will be able to verify that the Islamic Republic of Iran will not develop a nuclear weapon.
Okay? And Ramirez in Investors Business Daily did his great usual editorial cartoon. Obama says, "I got everything I wanted." And somebody says, "You wanted to get a nuclear weapon, you wanted Iran to get a nuclear weapon and start a nuclear arms race in a region awash with money, surrogates of terror, and little value of human life?" Prime Minister Netanyahu had, as you would expect, a very terse response.
The world is a much more dangerous place today than it was yesterday. The leading international powers have bet our collective future on a deal with the foremost sponsor of international terrorism. They've gambled that in 10 years' time, Iran's terrorist regime will change while removing any incentive for it to do so. In fact, the deal gives Iran every incentive not to change. In the coming decade, the deal will reward Iran, the terrorist regime in Tehran, with hundreds of billions of dollars. This cash bonanza will fuel Iran's terrorism worldwide, its aggression in the region, and its efforts to destroy Israel, which are ongoing. Amazingly, this bad deal does not require Iran to cease its aggressive behavior in any way. And just last Friday, that aggression was on display for all to see. While the negotiators were closing the deal in Vienna, Iran's supposedly moderate president chose to go to a rally in Tehran. And at this rally, a frenzied mob burned American and Israeli flags and chanted, "Death to America, death to Israel." Now, this didn't happen 4 years ago. It happened 4 days ago. Iran's supreme leader, the Ayatollah Khamenei, said on March 21st that the deal does not limit Iran's aggression in any way. He said, "Negotiations with the United States on the nuclear issue and on nothing else." And 3 days ago, he made that clear again. The United States, he said, embodies global arrogance, and the battle against it will continue unabated even after the nuclear agreement is concluded. Here's what Hassan Nasrallah, the head of Iran's terrorist proxy Hezbollah, said about sanctions relief, which is a key component of the deal. He said, "A rich and strong Iran will be able to stand by its allies and friends in the region more than at any time in the past." Translation? Iran's support for terrorism and subversion will actually increase after the deal. In addition to filling Iran's terror war chest, this deal repeats the mistakes made with North Korea. There too, we were assured that inspections and verifications would prevent a rogue regime from developing nuclear weapons. And we all know how that ended. The bottom line of this very bad deal is exactly what Iran's President Rouhani said today. The international community is removing the sanctions, and Iran is keeping its nuclear program. By not dismantling Iran's nuclear program, in a decade, this deal will give an unreformed, unrepentant, and far richer terrorist regime the capacity to produce many nuclear bombs. In fact, an entire nuclear arsenal with the means to deliver it. What a stunning, historic mistake. Israel is not bound by this deal with Iran, and Israel is not bound by this deal with Iran because Iran continues to seek our destruction. We will always defend ourselves.
And then the Iranian press and other Arab press and other Islamic press around the world, big celebrations in the streets of Tehran. Here's some quotes. Here's a from one of the Hezbollah. Iran is now a superpower, and the other superpowers have recognized this. Today, it is a strong and mindful country that can be trusted to play a role in reaching arrangements and dealing with crises of tension in our region. However, it will absolutely not recognize Israel, the entity that stole Jerusalem and Palestine, and no one can forget this. Iran has said this and is committed to it. Another comment from a Sunni. This is the era of Iran that leaves behind the black Saudi area that has prevailed since the mid-1970s, that destroyed Egypt and later Iraq and Syria, and for whose destructive plans the Palestinians and Lebanese have paid a heavy price. The Arabs, with their various political trends, have no choice but to launch an initiative aimed at finding a new formula for coexisting with this Iranian era and benefiting from it. Bashar al-Assad, the butcher of Syria, said this: "I am gladdened by the huge victory that Iran achieved in reaching a final agreement with the P5+1 on the Iranian nuclear dossier. In the name of the Syrian people and in my own name, I congratulate you and the fraternal Iranian people from all my heart on this historic victory. It is our duty as Arabs to hasten to reap the benefits of this agreement and not to divert Arab worries away from Zionism and towards our Iranian friends and brothers." Here's a brief discussion yesterday on the Journal editorial report. Brett Stevens and some other gentlemen talking about the deal.
Brett, you didn't think this would go ahead because you thought the Ayatollah Khamenei, the supreme leader of Iran, would not, in the end, agree to a deal on these inspections. Why do you think he did in the end?
Well, they made him an offer he couldn't refuse, but in a good way, or at least as far as he not in the Don Corleone way. Look, what I thought was
good deal for Iran, you mean?
It's a superb deal for Iran. What I thought was going to be the sticking point was the ballistic missile issue, because the Ayatollah had said clearly that there is no way that they were going to accept limits on their ballistic missile program. And you had, by the way, on the American side, you had people like General Dempsey, the outgoing chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, saying that there was no way the United States could ever allow them to import ballistic missiles.
And in the end, they agreed to 8 years of restrictions on the imports of the technology for ballistic missiles.
Right.
But only 8 years.
So in 8 years, Iran can import state-of-the-art ballistic missiles beyond simply what they are doing in terms of their own domestic production. Ballistic missiles are a key component of any nuclear program because that's the way you most effectively can deliver a bomb.
All right, so what about the actual terms on the nuclear side of this bill? Is there anything that you like in here? Because the president says, now look, we didn't care about anything else. We didn't care about Iran's other activity, terrorism. All we were focused on was this nuclear deal. Did he put enough restrictions on that?
No, I think actually it's the wrong question to ask what restrictions Iran has. If you look at this deal, the restrictions are all on us. You know, who can inspect the plants, what the timetable is. Look, the sanctions that are removed, they were put in place over years. And the idea that they're going to snap back if Iran violates this is just crazy. You just simply can't do it that fast. So I think the real way to look at this deal is all the restrictions it puts on us.
Well, but wait a minute now.
Okay, and then here's former UN Ambassador John Bolton answering Greta Van Susteren's question on Off the Record about, do you think Iran will keep its word?
Ambassador, will Iran keep its word?
Absolutely not. I'd tweet twice on that. Look, Iran has been violating its commitment under the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty not to seek nuclear weapons for almost 35 years. So today it's agreed to commit not to seek nuclear weapons under this agreement. There's no evidence whatever that Iran has made a strategic decision to give up that long quest for deliverable nuclear weapons. That's a critical fallacy underlying the entire Obama administration position.
Here's what sort of alarming to me is that India, Pakistan, and North Korea essentially set off nuclear arms tests, nuclear tests without us knowing about it, and those were our friends. But we got caught off guard. I mean, what is the level of confidence that we truly can monitor what they do? They're supposed to have a year breakout period in which they can't do anything, but...
Well, let me just, you know, the administration, the president said today, right now they could break out in 2 to 3 months, which I think is accurate. For 6 years, the Obama administration denied that. So now they say, having rejected the idea that Iran was close to nuclear weapons, say now we've pushed them back 1 year. That rests on
9 months, really. Well, if it's 2 to 3 already, 9 months.
1 year total, right. That rests on another critical fallacy, that we know everything that Iran is doing on its nuclear weapons program. That's a very chancy thing to say at best. And the IAEA, the International Atomic Energy Agency, will not be able to find it out under the terms of the deal agreed today.
Well, we were surprised when we found out that they had an underground installation. You know, I mean, there's
at Fordo. And who knows what else they've been building over the past several years in the Zagros Mountains, a huge area of the country, very hard to detect, or what they're doing together with North Korea under a mountain in North Korea.
So what was our alternative? To have no deal at all and have the sanctions continue to cripple them? Is that what the
sanctions were not crippling them? I mean,
so what would you have done?
Well, I think the course we've been on really for 20 years now has led to the point where the most likely outcome, deal or no deal, is Iran gets nuclear weapons. The unpleasant reality is the only way to stop Iran from getting nuclear weapons is if somebody's prepared to use military force. The president himself said all the time, all options are on the table, but he never meant it, and he doesn't mean it now. That's why it's up to Israel, one way or the other.
So would you expect that Israel would take some military action, or is Israel going to just sit back and be unhappy with this and watch it unfold whichever way it unfolds?
I think they should have taken action 5 years ago.
But what do they do now?
Well, they should act today before it gets worse. But I'll tell you, under the terms of the deal, the Europeans will help Iran develop advanced centrifuge technology at that Fordo facility that you mentioned. Once Europeans are in that facility, it's immune from bombing.
Can we expect, in your view, that there's going to be a nuclear arms race in the Middle East?
The nuclear arms race has already begun. We've known for some time the Saudis have options on Pakistan's existing nuclear arsenal. They're now building their own indigenous capability. Egypt, Jordan, Turkey will follow suit, and perhaps others. So again, regardless of this deal, the past 2 years of negotiations have convinced many in the region that they need to look out for number one, and that's what they've started to do.
Ambassador, thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Well, now, so here's Susan Rice, former UN ambassador under the Obama administration. And by the way, we're going to go till about 12:15 because the New Believers class begged me to do it because they need more time today. So, you know, it's not me this time, okay? I just happen to have enough to cover, I think, an extra 15 minutes. So here's Susan Rice, interviewed by Wolf Blitzer on CNN, and listen to her response. I think it's a stunning admission.
Are there any restrictions on how the Iranians can use that money? Obviously, they could use it to build schools or highways, but they could use it to support international terrorism, right?
Well, let's back up and let's understand what this is about. Remember, the sanctions that we and the international community put in place were for one reason: to prevent Iran from getting a nuclear weapon. That was the existential threat that we were all concerned about, the United States, Israel, and the whole world. This deal will verifiably prevent that from happening. They have to let the IAEA in and establish this 24/7 monitoring that I described. All of those steps have to be taken, and then at that point, the sanctions will be suspended, and Iran will begin to be able to access its frozen accounts around the world. What do we think they'll spend that money on? We think for the most part, they're going to need to spend it on the Iranian people and their economy, which is tanked. And Rouhani, the president, was really elected on the hope that he would bring economic relief to the Iranian people.
But I just want to be precise.
It is real. It is possible, and in fact, we should expect that some portion of that money would go to the Iranian military and could potentially be used for the kinds of bad behavior that we have seen in the region up until now. But the goal here, Wolf, was never and was not designed to prevent them from engaging in bad behavior in the region. They're doing that today. The goal is to ensure that they don't have a nuclear weapon, and therefore, when they are engaging in that bad behavior, that much more dangerous.
No, I just want to be precise. So there's really, once the money starts flowing in, it's their money correctly. As I pointed out, as you pointed out, it's their money. What they can do with it, whatever they want. If they want to give $1 billion in weapons to Bashar al-Assad or $1 billion to Houthi rebels in Yemen.
No, they can't do that, Wolf, because they'll still be under an arms embargo. They would prevent them from sending weapons anywhere.
Well, what if they're not sending weapons? What if they're just sending money?
Well, they may be able to send money, yes. By the way, Wolf, just to be clear, they're sending money now while they're under sanctions. There's nothing currently that is preventing them from sending money.
They're going to have a lot more money if in fact the sanctions are lifted.
They will have more money once they have verifiably given up their nuclear weapons capacity and any ability to reconstitute.
Okay, at least she's honest. Okay, and the only thing I would say from this is I feel like one of those sort of cheap novelists. The fog of deception was so thick you could cut it with a knife, and because it's there. Jennifer Rubin in the Washington Post had a great article yesterday. 17 stupid things the president said in his press conference. I'm only going to go through a few of them. Okay, so but here's some of them.
With this deal, we cut off every single one of Iran's pathways to a nuclear program, a nuclear weapons program. And Iran's nuclear program will be under severe limits for many years.
Okay, no.
With this deal, if Iran violates its commitments, there will be real consequences. Nuclear-related sanctions that have helped to cripple the Iranian economy will snap back into place.
Snap back into place? Not going to happen. You heard Ambassador Bolton talk about that. Well, let's see what he says the next one.
As I said yesterday, even with this deal, we will continue to have profound differences with Iran. Its support of terrorism, its use of proxies to destabilize parts of the Middle East. Therefore, the multilateral arms embargo on Iran will remain in place for an additional 5 years, and restrictions on ballistic missile technology will remain for 8 years.
Okay, he's wrong on this. These are all just, I think you can understand that these things just are not true.
Now, we'll still have problems with Iran's sponsorship of terrorism. Its funding of proxies like Hezbollah that threaten Israel and threaten the region. The destabilizing activities that they're engaging in, including in places like Yemen. And my hope is that building on this deal, we can continue to have conversations with Iran that incentivize them to behave differently in the region, to be less aggressive, less hostile,
because
more
just
cooperative,
talking to me is enough.
to operate the way we expect nations in the international community to behave. But we're not counting on it.
We hope, but we're not counting on it, okay? Do you see the just total cognitive disconnect?
We have huge differences with Iran.
Hang on a second here.
So this deal is not contingent on Iran changing its behavior. It's not contingent on Iran suddenly operating like a liberal democracy.
Okay, here's the next.
We have huge differences with Iran. Israel has legitimate concerns about its security relative to Iran. I mean, you have a large country with a significant military that has proclaimed that Israel shouldn't exist, that has denied the Holocaust, that has financed Hezbollah, and as a consequence, there are missiles that are pointed towards Tel Aviv. And for all the objections of Prime Minister Netanyahu, or for that matter, some of the Republican leadership that's already spoken, none of them have presented to me or the American people
a better alternative.
That's just a bold-faced lie. So the New York Post had a good cover. The joke's on us. Iranians are laughing at us. In Israel, 78% of Jewish Israelis say that the Iran deal endangers the country. So much so that even Zippy Livni, who's been a big proponent of peace with everybody, says this is a bad deal. Charles Kreithammer has a good article that's worse than we can imagine. And so what does this mean? It means something needs to be done. Is it nuclear war? Does Israel undertake some of the things that were suggested a few years back to attack Iran? We have to see. Israel's not going to come out and say, hey, we're going to attack them in a few days or something like that. If they do it, you'll wake up to hear it. I don't know if the military option is on the table. We're going to talk about two things here before we finish. First is, now this supposedly has a 60-day approval process where the Congress of the United States can consider it and approve it or vote it down. What the Obama administration is doing, though, is being reported, and they are going around Congress. They are shredding the Constitution on this. This is from Foreign Policy, and this is reported widely elsewhere. Obama turns to UN to outmaneuver Congress. Here's what Foreign Policy said in an article yesterday. Washington is working on a new Security Council resolution making the nuclear deal legally binding on the next president. Last March, 47 Republicans, led by Senator Tom Cotton of Arkansas, wrote a letter warning Iran's supreme leader, Ayatollah Ali Khamenei, that a future U.S. president could legally revoke any nuclear deal that had been negotiated by Barack Obama's administration with the stroke of a pen. They clearly didn't realize that the White House has a way of making that much harder to do. The U.S. ambassador to the United Nations, and from what was reported by Caroline Glick, what Ambassador Power did was she actually had a draft of this resolution to pass out to everybody at the UN the day, and she was passing it out the day before the nuclear deal was announced by President Obama. This is to do an end run around Congress, go to the UN, get them to vote on it, and make it binding, legally binding on the United States. U.S. Ambassador to the United Nations Samantha Power on Monday circulated a legally binding draft to the 15-member UN Security Council that, if adopted, would give the body's backing to the landmark nuclear pact, trading billions of dollars in sanctions relief for greater international scrutiny of Iran's nuclear energy program. The 14-page draft resolution obtained by Foreign Policy is likely to put a vote by early next week. So this puts a tremendous amount of pressure, time-wise, on the Israelis. The decision to take the deal to the Security Council before the U.S. Congress has concluded its own deliberations on the agreement places lawmakers in the uncomfortable position of potentially acting contrary to a resolution that is binding on the administration by voting down the deal. The deal is infuriated. It should infuriate some Republicans. It should infuriate every single person in our government who see the administration making an end run around Congress. You remember what happened? Let's see, did I hear the term end run around Congress recently? Like when, what was that guy's name? When Prime Minister Netanyahu came to speak to Congress, didn't the Obama administration accuse Congress of doing an end run around the administration? Okay, now if you've ever in your life you don't understand what hypocrisy is, now you have a concrete example that you can cite to anyone right here, the Obama administration. Is that clear, by the way? Okay. Congress is currently weighing whether to accept or reject the deal brokered by the United States, Iran, and 5 world powers. Under the terms of a U.S. law passed this year, lawmakers can prevent the president from lifting congressional sanctions on Iran, which would blow up the landmark deal. However, if a resolution is approved by the Security Council early next week, any president, Democrat or Republican, would be legally required to comply with many of its key provisions.
If Congress were to veto the deal, the United States of America would be in non-compliance with this agreement.
Let me back this up.
If Congress were to veto the deal, the United States of America would be in non-compliance with this agreement, and contrary to all of the other countries in the world. I don't think that's going to happen.
Kerry went on to suggest that the nuclear accord will likely win growing acceptance in Washington if Iran fully implements its obligations and is able to demonstrate that they're not able or ready to make a bomb. I am convinced that whoever is our next president will see the wisdom of this agreement and they will leave it in place, Kerry added. The question is highly sensitive for the White House because Kerry assured Congress last March that the big power nuclear pact with Iran would not be legally binding on the United States. Okay, so now you have another example of hypocrisy. Okay? Really, you do. Ed Royce said, I spoke with Deputy Secretary, he's a congressman from California, head of the Foreign Affairs Committee of the House. We discussed the agreement reached in Vienna on Iran's nuclear programs. I shared with Deputy Secretary Blinken some of the concerns members of the committee raised at today's hearing. I urge that the Obama administration not seek action at the UN Security Council on the agreement before Congress can review it in detail during the legislative mandated congressional review period. Mark Langfan, marklangfan.com, he writes very well on Israeli issues. He's an attorney. In a diplomatic blitzkrieg, the Obama administration is set this coming Monday at 9 a.m. Eastern Standard Time for a vote at the UN Security Council in New York on the adoption of the Iran nuclear deal, which was announced by the world's leading powers in the Islamic Republic of Iran in Vienna on Tuesday. The Iran Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action resolution is now under silence, and its adoption has been scheduled for Monday, 20 July at 9 a.m., read the announcement on the Iran vote. And what the under silence means is that it really requires whoever objects to it to come. It's assumed that everybody will vote for this. But what it does is it requires somebody to step up and say they oppose it. So what this is doing is, this is, again, our government, our administration, putting additional burdens on the Israeli government because the Israeli government is going to have to do this. There's a diplomatic handbook that talks about this. Under silence procedure is described as being used by the majority where a proposal with strong support is deemed to have been agreed unless any member raises an objection to it before a precise deadline. Silence signifies assent or at least acquiescence. Applying this analysis to the under silence adoption of the JCPOA at the UN Security Council, the Obama administration's use of the under silence procedure would appear to be an attempt to scare Israel into fearing that raising an objection to the Iranian nuclear deal will expose Israel, to the charge of obstructiveness and perils of isolation. And these people say they're a supporter of Israel? Give me a break. Contrariwise, Israel's failure to raise an objection would be seen as assent or at least acquiescence. To make matters worse for Israel, with Israel's objection, the UN Security Council would likely then unanimously vote 15-0 for the Iranian deal. Given Iranian leaders' course of threatening to wipe Israel off the map, it would appear Israel will likely run the gauntlet of President Obama's under silence anyway and forcefully speak out against the measure. And for history's sake, it would be important to have the 15 members of the UN Security Council go on record as having voted for what many have called a modern-day 1938 Munich appeasement of the Nazis in a comparison to the Islamic regime's calls to destroy Israel while reportedly building a nuclear arsenal. And Caroline Glick picked up on this the other day, and she put this on her Facebook page, missing Neville Chamberlain. In those 3 words, she encapsulated every concern that people have about this, because Neville Chamberlain is a historical joke because he got bamboozled by the Nazis. Now, Mark Langfan had an article in Israeli National News last week where he compared Neville Chamberlain and the Nazis to Barack Obama and the Iranians. And the difference, there are some big differences. One, Iran is dominated by a religious fervor on this issue, and now they have nukes, or will have nukes. That's a huge difference. So in terms of, Neville Chamberlain and Germany, Barack Obama and Iran, which one's worse? Barack Obama and Iran by a large margin, according to everybody. Here's Caroline Glick's article and I'll close with this, Friday and the Jerusalem Post. Just a few more minutes. On Tuesday, we moved into a new nuclear age. In the old nuclear age, the U.S.-led West had a system for preventing the proliferation of nuclear weapons. It had 3 components: sanctions, deterrence, and military force. In recent years, we have witnessed the successful deployment of all three. In the aftermath of the 1991 Gulf War, the UN Security Council imposed a harsh sanctions regime on Iraq. One of its purposes was to prevent Iraq from developing nuclear weapons. After the U.S.-led invasion of Iraq in 2003, we learned that the sanctions had been successful. Saddam largely abandoned his nuclear program due to sanctions pressure. No one was more deterred by the Americans in those years than then Libyan dictator Muammar Gaddafi. In 2004, Gaddafi divulged all of the details of his secret nuclear program and handed all of his nuclear materials over to the Americans. Under the deal with Iran, in 5 years, Iran will have unlimited access to the international conventional arms market. In 8 years, Iran will be able to purchase and develop whatever missile systems it desires. And in 10 years, most of the limitations on its nuclear program will be removed. Because the deal permits Iran to develop advanced centrifuges, when the agreement ends in 10 years, Iran will be positioned to develop nuclear weapons immediately. In other words, if Iran abides by the agreement or isn't punished for cheating on it, in 10 years, the greatest state sponsor of terrorism in the world will be rich, in possession of a modernized military, a ballistic missile arsenal capable of carrying nuclear warheads to any spot on Earth, and the nuclear warheads themselves. Facing this new nuclear reality, the states of the region, including Jordan, Egypt, Saudi Arabia, Turkey, and perhaps the Emirates, will likely begin to develop nuclear arsenals. ISIS will likely use the remnants of the Iraqi and Syrian programs to build its own nuclear program. Obama will be deeply bitter if Congress rejects his historic achievement. He can expect to do as little as possible to enforce the U.S. sanctions regime against his Iranian comrades. Certainly, he will take no military action against Iran's nuclear program. In a bid to tie the hands of her boss's successor and render Congress powerless to curb his actions, the day before the deal was concluded, Obama's UN ambassador, Samantha Power, circulated a binding draft resolution to Security Council members that would prohibit member nations from taking action to harm the agreement. Under international law, it's binding. If the resolution passes, and it is impossible to imagine it failing to pass, then Iran can stay in the deal, develop the bomb with international support, and the U.S. will be found in breach of a binding UN security resolution. Given that under all scenarios, Tuesday's deal ensures that Iran will become a threshold nuclear power, it must be assumed that Iran's neighbors will now seek their own nuclear options. Moreover, it is clear, regardless of the congressional action, the deal has already ruined the 70-year-old non-proliferation system that prevented nuclear chaos and war. I want you to understand Caroline Glick's, and put this in the context of what we know is coming in the world of Bible prophecy. And what she's saying is coming. I mean, you know, Caroline, I don't know what she knows about. I've seen her speak at Bible prophecy conferences, but I don't think she's a believer. But she understands the way the world works. And what we need to get our heads around, the fact is that the Bible, the prophetic scriptures, describe the world that we live in right at this moment. I mean, let me finish this and I'll make a couple comments. After all, now that the U.S. has capitulated to Iran, its avowed foe and the greatest state sponsor of terrorism, who will take future American calls for sanctions against nuclear proliferators seriously? Who will be deterred by American threats that all options are on the table when the U.S. has agreed to protect Iran's nuclear installations and develop advanced centrifuges for the same Ayatollahs who daily chant death to America? Given Israel's very limited military options, we will soon find ourselves living under constant nuclear threat. Under these new circumstances, Israel must invest every possible effort in developing and deploying active nuclear defenses. One key aspect to that is missile defense system, which Israel is already developing. Here is the place to mention that Israel still may have the ability to attack Iran's nuclear site. If it does, then it should attack them as quickly and effectively as possible. No, a successful Israeli attack cannot turn back the clock. Israel cannot replace the U.S. as a regional superpower, dictating policy to our neighbors. But a successful attack on Iran's nuclear program, along with the adoption of a vigilantly upheld strategy of active nuclear defense, can form the basis of a successful Israeli nuclear defense system. Years from now, perhaps historians will point out the irony that an Obama who loudly proclaims his goal of making the world free of nuclear weapons has ushered in an area of mass nuclear proliferation and chaos. Israel can ill afford the luxury of pondering irony. One day, the nuclear furies Obama has unleashed may find their way to New York City, but their path to America runs through Israel. We need to ready ourselves to destroy them before I cross our border. And I will cite you to this reference. I have the passage number on. It's Ezekiel 39, verse 6. And I will send a fire on Magog, and among them that dwell carelessly in the isles or between the coastlands. And they shall know that I am the Lord. Is that a reference to the United States? Some people think so. But let me just suggest this. That scenario is very, very possible. That's why I titled this DEFCON 1, Iran Nuke Deal, DEFCON 1, question mark. Because it is a very serious situation. It does sort of bring, if this is the way it plays out and this is a reference to the United States, you know, we're on the cups of the Bible prophecy being able to be fulfilled. 2,500-year-old prophecy now could happen. And that's what we should take away from this. And then the other thing I would suggest is this, and I don't really have the time that I want to develop it today, and maybe I'll do an update this week since we're not having service here next week, but Israel now is under extreme world pressure and isolation. A rogue government that threatens another Holocaust of the Jewish people is on the cusp of having nuclear technology to accomplish that with a few missiles. I would suggest to you that we know that this 70th week of Daniel that we talk about so often kicks off with the confirmation of a covenant to protect the Jewish people. And my point is this. Have we ever lived at a time where there is pressure on the Israeli people? And we know from Daniel chapter 12 that when all this unfolds, they will be a nation. All these people out there who say, oh, this is not of God, this is not fulfillment, baloney. Daniel 12:1 says that a nation of Jews will be significant in the end times. And there they are. It's hard to deny the reality of the situation we live in. The facts on the ground are Israel exists as a nation. But have they ever been in a position where they would be more willing to confirm this covenant, which Isaiah describes as a covenant of death? I don't think there's ever been a time when it's more apparent that what could start off the 70th week of Daniel is present in the world. Tremendous pressure on Israel to do this. So, look at what we talked about today. The culture, Planned Parenthood, the evil in America. How much longer is God going to put up with this stuff from us? So, I don't know. You know, every day is mercy at this point, in my judgment. Clean up your lives, repent, get your life in order, live holy lives, share the gospel, and be ready to meet the King. And do what we need to do in this time, whether that's stand and face persecution, stand as a witness to the world and Israel. It's time to do it, okay? And we'll do it with the power of the Spirit and the knowledge of the Word, because He's laid out everything for us that's going to happen. So let's pray, and we'll get out of here. Lord, again, every week we're so grateful for the Word that You've given us so that we can understand and make sense of what even secular people that aren't familiar with the prophetic passages in the Word that You gave us, even secular people wonder what is going on, what's happening to the world. Lord, give us the strength of Your Spirit, the knowledge of Your Word to live holy lives right before You and as examples to those around us, and to give us boldness and knowledge about how we can effectively communicate the truth of Your gospel in the world today. Bless us as we go this week. In Jesus' name, amen.